Hey everyone, it's Yvonne Inglesas here from the Eating Disorder Recovery Hub, and I want to remind you again to please subscribe to our Facebook page so that you can actually see when I go live and you can join me. That way I can actually answer any questions that you have about the topic I'm speaking about as I'm doing these lives. Today my topic is you have not chosen the eating disorder, but you must choose recovery. So I wanted to do this one because I think it's really important, because most people I know that have eating disorders, and I know I did this to myself a lot, majority of the time actually, was I gave myself a really fucking hard time because I thought I needed to just stop. Why couldn't I just stop it? And I just thought, I needed to, I didn't realize at the time that you needed to have a hell of a lot more self-compassion than I actually did. But I just thought this was something that I could just easily stop. But I didn't realize that I didn't actually choose to have it, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is it seems really oversimplified. People, like society in general, just think that, well, this person decided to diet and all of a sudden they've become super obsessed with an eating disorder. It kind of doesn't happen like that. I don't know about you guys, but actually the eating disorder with me really crept up on me. I started to experiment with things, and I always believed that I had enough control over it to stop when I was ready to or when I needed to. And that was, I think, and I believe how everybody gets caught in this is that you really do believe it's not an issue at first because it's probably not that major, but you don't realize how much you get to depend on the behaviors, right? So when I say you haven't chosen the eating disorder, what I mean by this is you haven't consciously made a decision to go, look, I think it might be fun to have an eating disorder. No one in their fucking right mind would do that, right? Because the reality is having an eating disorder is a living hell. And I don't care what anyone says that hasn't had one. They may believe that it's, something you choose, but it's absolutely not, right? What happens is there's all these unconscious things that actually drive you towards living out these behaviors. And I know people oversimplify it. People think that it's just about chasing the perfect number on the scales or a certain body type, and they really feel like that's all it is. And what I want to say to anyone watching, anyone that's going to watch this in the future, is that actually there is so much of your unconscious playing out in an eating disorder that you don't even know it at the moment, right? You don't know how much of your unconscious is driving it, because more often than not, people that I work with, people that have come to me for help, they always talk about they don't know what's going on. They just find themselves, whether it's binging, restricting, purging, whatever it is, they just find themselves doing it, and they don't think that there's anything really forcing them to do it. For some people, they may have some awareness but don't know how to stop. But what I wanted to tell you is that choosing to recover is a daily thing, right? It's not just, look, I make the choice, I really want to recover, and then I'm done with it. Every single day is a choice, and the choice is this. It's not just to recover, right? Because if you had that as your only sort of vision, you may be quite black and white with it. So I'm either recovering or I'm not. I'm either focused on recovery or not. And if you could actually shift this from recovery to, I'm going to focus on making all the unconscious things that are driving the eating disorder behaviors, I'm going to focus on understanding what they are, getting to know what those unconscious things are, because the more you can build a relationship with your unconscious, so bring more of the unconscious stuff driving the eating disorder into your awareness, right? The more likely you are to be able to let go of the behaviors, because you can start shifting what's going on. Now, this doesn't always happen straight away. I'm going to give you a massive warning with this, because one of the things when I've worked with clients and when we're working on, so we're not just working on the superficial, let's change your behaviors, let's focus on food, let's focus on getting you regular with your meals. I'm talking about when we're focusing on the stuff you need to look at to heal, right? So deeper than focusing on your food and meal plans, and starting to really look at your relationships and whatever else is going on, the eating disorders sometimes get worse. Yes, you heard me right. They sometimes get worse. And the reason they get worse to begin with is that you start becoming aware of the shit that's actually driving it. And that gets to feel uncomfortable. So what do I mean by that, right? So imagine we start talking about a situation that you've just, so let's go. In the past, a major trauma happened in the family, not even just specifically to you, but in the family. And it had an impact on you. And you start talking about it, whether it's in your treatment, with your therapist, in a program, whatever you're doing, and you start to talk about the experience. Now, more often than not, people with eating disorders downplay the intensity of situations. I did that so many times, can't tell you, thinking that things were not such a big deal, because I actually had to squash my feelings around a lot of things. And I didn't realize that that actually contributed to the eating disorder behaviors, right? So as you start to unpack and talk about things, that you can notice that the eating disorder behaviors actually get worse. And what happens is often the person with the eating disorder goes, this is shit because it's making the eating disorder behaviors worsen. So I don't want that. And they often will leave, take off, think it's not working, right? And what I want to encourage you to do is actually realize that what you're doing is starting to get to know some of the stuff that's in your unconscious. So you're becoming aware of it, which makes it uncomfortable. At some level, you already know this discomfort because you're using the behaviors, right? You already know that, but you don't know it in your conscious mind. So this is the bit where behaviors often intensify, because if you start talking about that, go back to my example, those traumas, and you start realizing actually there was a lot that wasn't resolved. There was a lot that happened that we didn't talk about in the family, or I wasn't supported enough and I didn't know it, or I didn't know how to express myself. And you start realizing some of that stuff. It means usually the behaviors will intensify because you're working out how to process what you thought was done with, right? So, and I know people will go, I don't want my eating disorder behaviors to intensify. Well, they won't stay that way. They won't remain uncomfortably distressing forever and a day, because once you start processing what happens in your unconscious, then you will build the skills to actually not need the behaviors in the way you do. Now, this isn't a 1, 2, 3 step process, okay? Just to be clear. What happens is you start becoming aware of your unconscious behaviors and feelings and thoughts that are leading you to the eating disorder behaviors. And then you start commit yourself each day to getting to know those unconscious bits a bit more. And then we'll develop some skills. So it doesn't happen all at once, just so you know. Becoming aware of that unconscious stuff is critical to you being able to have a life without the eating disorders. Now, I don't know how many people will actually like hearing this, because what this is about is the fact that you have not consciously chosen to have the eating disorder, right? No one in their right mind would, okay? So anytime you hear people say, oh, it's dieting gone wrong, or you just need to choose to eat, or you just need to choose to have really strong willpower, that's a crock of shit, just so that you know. And what I want to say to you is why you have an eating disorder is going to really impact you. Now, Lou, thank you. You've said it's taken me 25 years to realize that the eating disorder was driven by my emotions. When I start binging, I switch off. I don't think about anything. It's peaceful. It's the peace I'm addicted to. Absolutely, right? Thank you, Lou, for saying something that is critical for lots of people to understand, get to know, because the eating disorder behaviors are what help you to numb out, to distance yourself from feelings, to get through difficult situations, because at the time that you have the eating disorder, you don't have enough skills on board, or you don't have the capacity to actually feel intense feelings without it feeling like it's going to kill you, like emotionally kill you. So, of course, the behaviors actually help to soothe you. They help you to deal with stuff. So it feels uncomfortable, right? Because then you start focusing on the behaviors rather than the thing that's actually distressing you. So back to the title of this live, which was, you haven't chosen this. really, please, when you're listening to this, give yourself a break. You have not chosen this. And people go, oh, well, it's, if it's 10 years, 20 years, at some point, don't you want to stop? And it's like, if enough people knew how to help people with eating disorders in the right way, where it's not oversimplified, it's not just focusing on stabilizing meals, and that you could get to the real unconscious stuff that is driving the eating disorder, then yes, of course you would change your behaviors, right? But most people don't get that help. They don't get that level of help because not enough professionals are focusing on the fact that you can permanently recover from an eating disorder. Guys, it's so important because too many people are still stuck in that you need to abstain from your trigger foods, you need to abstain from certain things, which means if you need to still abstain, you usually haven't worked through all the unconscious stuff that's driving you towards the eating disorder behaviors. So that might be a big statement by me, but I can absolutely say it with, 200% certainty, because that's what I've been able to do, and that's what I want you to start believing in. I want you to realize that you haven't chosen this. You haven't consciously said to yourself, I think it's a good idea to have an eating disorder, right? And that to recover, you do need to choose every single day, not just recovery, but I need to get to know the bits of me, the unconscious parts of me that keep going towards the eating disorder behaviors. What's going on for me, right? I can't stress this enough. You will stay stuck. You will stay, stuck with these eating disorder behaviors unless you actually commit to that. Commit to actually understanding what is driving this for me, right? And I mean, one of my key things was I was a serious rescuer. Like I couldn't tolerate conflict. I hated if there was anger in the room. I could not deal with it if I was going to argue with someone. I couldn't deal with all of that stuff. So I was constantly struggling with all of that. And I had no idea, right? Honestly, in the midst of the eating disorder, I had no idea that that stuff was driving me to need the eating disorder behaviors, to use and abuse food and my body in the way I used to do. I had no fucking idea. So, I don't think enough people understand all the unconscious things that, so when I say I hated conflict, I mean, I never saw conflict in my home. I didn't see it. I didn't know that you could have conflict with people and still love one another. I had this fantasy in my head that when you have a conflict, that it meant the relationship ended. It meant that that you don't love one another anymore. So all of these fantasies I had in my head, which I didn't know at the time, I didn't know that they were driving me to the behaviors, but they were, guys. They were absolutely leading me to eat. So rather than speak up about what I needed, or if I was really frustrated and had a difference of opinion with someone, I would more often than not, find myself binging, find myself doing, at one point in the eating disorder, I had an exercise addiction. So I was doing like 3 classes at the gym every day and walking to and from the gym, which was a whole other 8Ks. Like I was just doing so much to manage all of this stuff that was going on inside of me. And I had no idea that I needed to look at the stuff looking at myself and the things I was trying to avoid, right? Trying to avoid conflict. What did I need to work on in order to try and avoid, trying to get comfortable with conflict, and what I needed to say. So you haven't chosen the eating disorder, but you must choose recovery. Recovery doesn't mean just stabilizing your weight. Recovery doesn't just mean being symptom free, because believe me, I spent a whole lot of time in that space and it didn't mean I was recovered at all. I still thought like someone with an eating disorder. I still behaved like someone with an eating disorder. I still struggled with intimacy with other people. I struggled to be vulnerable. I struggled not to be paralyzed by shame. I just struggled, right? Sure, I didn't fit the criteria of the eating disorder anymore, so I couldn't have that diagnosis, but I was tormented inside. Now, that's where I think a lot of people actually stop their recovery, because they actually think that that's it, that's as good as it gets, because a lot of professionals don't know how to take you beyond that. And that's where I'm saying to you, in order for you to recover, to get to a place where you are free permanently, forever, free of the eating disorder behaviors and the obsession around food, weight, and body. We need to help you understand all the unconscious stuff driving it. So I will leave it here for now because I wanted this message to just be one specific thing. Do not give yourself a hard time for having the eating disorder, guys, because you have not chosen this consciously. Please, 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 if you take one thing away from it, take that, and that recovery is a daily choice. Each day, choose to become more aware of yourself, more aware of the things that are bringing you towards the behaviors, and start seeing your life change just by committing to getting to know more of yourself. Okay, I'm glad you joined me. Thank you so much, Lou, for joining in the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you can actually be part of these conversations when I'm having them, and I can respond in the moment, which I love doing. And I look forward to talking to you more. If you're interested in having more conversations like this, don't forget to join the Eating Disorder Recovery Hub, where I get to speak to you a little bit more intimately and provide heaps of videos where you can feel supported to be permanently recovered and out of the eating disorder. Take care. Bye.